welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am your host, Steve Harper, and with me, as always, is the amazing, beautiful Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm really excited about today's conversation.
Me too. I'm jazzed. Well, I got to be honest. I'm excited anytime we do this. So, I mean, but today, I know we have a really good conversation ahead. And what question are we dealing with today?
This is a question to ask ourselves when we're in the middle of something that we need to make a quick decision.
Yeah.
So the reflective question is, how do I want to be seen?
Mm. How do I want to be seen? So, can you provide some context, maybe some, how did this come up in your mind as to how or where you would apply this? High tense
So
situations,
yeah,
going into a meeting, presenting a business idea. What do you think?
it's for anything really.
Okay.
Do I'm preparing for a keynote on Friday, and one of the things that I'm sharing is my story about when I went into the music program in university for performance percussion, and in the early 70s, females just didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I was accepted was because it was a blind audition. And the reason I'm saying that is because the first thing my teacher told me was, ready for this? You're a female, you're just going to get married and have kids, and you're never going to perform anyway. Why should I even bother spending time with you or giving you parts?
Ouch.
This is where a question like this comes to mind. Because if it's a mental muscle of the questions you need to ask yourself, this was important. Because if I said to myself, okay, what could I do with this? I could go to the administration, lodge a formal complaint. I was accepted into the program because I passed muster and I was able to outshine, other people who
Yeah.
auditioned, all of that stuff. And here's the question: how do I want to be seen? Do I want to be seen, excuse the expression, as the bitch, going, the female, the token female?
Yep.
Why are females in percussion to start off with all that stuff?
Yeah.
Complaining because she doesn't like, what the hand that she's dealt? Or do I want to be seen as somebody so amazing it wouldn't occur to him not to put me on stage?
Mm.
And that's the stance. So you ask yourself, how do I want to be seen when you're about to lace into somebody, complain on behalf of your kids to school, and be a problem person, as opposed to somebody who is professional, who's operating from integrity, who wants the best for all parties to the extent that that could happen. That question is so powerful.
That
It's
is.
also powerful, though, like if you have this self-image issue, or you don't think you measure up, to somebody else, or I'm not as good as,
Yeah.
the kind of conversations we have in our minds. How do I want to be seen?
So
Do I
so
want to be seen as minimizing, or do I want to be seen as somebody who could stand on their own 2 feet in their own right?
I love that. So, the fact that you're putting the question forward, I think for our audience is really important, because I think if you're not prepared to actually put yourself in those situations where you need to ask that question before you respond or react, I think is really important. So there's a huge life lesson for everybody out there, including myself. Not just to speak off the cuff, but actually think about what you want that other person or that other party, how you want to be interpreted, how you want to be understood. I think that's great. So in the moment because that was a confrontational way to come at you, right? when that individual did what they did. So how were you able to, in the moment, control your temper to the point that you didn't just lash out? And was that something that and hopefully you don't mind sharing one way or the other. Maybe you didn't know at that point in your life that that's how you're supposed to do it. Or did you know at that point, like, take a breath, allow that comment to sink in, and then consciously think about asking that question: how do I want to be perceived as to how I go forward and how I respond?
It's a really good question. I think it was instinctive, because there's certain circumstances that pop up that you have no prep for,
Yeah.
that you have. It's this pivotal moment, right?
Yep.
You could say, I could just give him a what for, which I was, let me tell you, I've got a temper. I could just have laced into him, which would have influenced negatively every other interaction I had with him for the rest of the program, to the point where he could have made me just throw my hands up in the air and say, I have enough.
Yeah.
Like I fought hard to get here, but if I don't get any airtime and get up on stage and actually get to practice my craft, my instrument, then what is the point? I mean, as it was, I knew in the program you had to audition every year of the program. So for a 4-year program, before each year, you had to audition to prove that you were still worthy of being in it.
Yeah.
So it's not just getting into it and then, going to university and then graduating. You had to prove yourself every single year that you could stay there and that you could keep that position. So something told me what I say now will influence the rest of my career.
Yeah.
Because he was the top percussionist in the country that I was thrilled to be learning from, right? And I just looked at him and I said, I am going to prove you wrong by being so amazing. It's not going to occur to you to not put me on stage. So the gauntlet has been thrown.
Thrown down.
And he was not looking at that. I needed to respect myself. I respected him for his experience and his talent. And I wanted to learn from him. So I could either fight with him or I could prove him wrong by being so good. And my reading was better than his was when it came to keyboards. And he realized he had to put me on stage because I was better than the rest.
Yeah.
So, it's not always as cut and dry as a musical instrument or like a demonstrated talent. It's often much more subtle. The question isn't what are they thinking? The question is, how are you going to respond based on how do you want to be seen?
Yep. How do you want to be seen, and ultimately how you want them to think about you and perceive your response or your reaction. And I know in the moment I am incredibly reactionary, and my wife criticizes me about this quite a bit because I have a tendency, because I'm passionate, right? And so I have sort of a verbose temper myself when things are not right or circumstances play out the way that they shouldn't be playing out, and I have a tendency to take a stand. But I also then sometimes have that feeling of regret that I responded in a way that wasn't becoming of who I am or what I'm about or how I could have done. I think about how I could have handled those things differently, and it's so much living with regret, that feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach that you didn't put your best foot forward in a circumstance, confrontational or otherwise. Always has a tendency to bother you, but there's a lesson to be learned so that you better prepare yourself going forward to not respond or react that way. And basically asking this question, how do I want to be seen? Such a valuable question to ask yourself if you're coming into a high tense conversation or an important business meeting, or you're meeting somebody for the first time and the potential of a relationship is there. And how do you want to be seen, I think is something that gives you some mental fodder to go through as you prepare. And I think a lot of times, especially in today's world where everything is so fast paced, we don't slow down enough to actually contemplate these things, which is why we do this show, right? At the end of the day, we ask these questions and we put these things out into the world, hoping that people will take that extra pause and actually contemplate that. So if you think through just this past week, how many of those potential conversations you had, and if you had been better mentally prepared by asking yourself how you want to be seen, how those might have been different and maybe, gone, smoother, or maybe even been more beneficial. I just think that there's a huge value in terms of leveraging that question in almost every circumstance.
It only takes a second.
Yeah.
That question, when you're asking it yourself, it's in your head. You don't have to really articulate it. The minute you say, how do I want to be seen? I mean, it's seconds.
Yeah.
The point of it is to understand. I mean, there's a myriad of questions, right?
Sure.
And we talk about this in so many ways. How do you want the person to feel after the conversation? Do you want them to feel that you respect them, even though you're ticked off at them? Like, there are so many different ways
Yeah.
of approaching things. I think the question, how do I want to be seen, also speaks to my values
Yep. Yep.
and boundaries that we set. And how do we respond? I know we keep referring to Tung Fu. How do we respond in a way that doesn't cause confrontation, but cooperation with ourselves as well?
Yeah. Yep.
Because if the answer is, I want to be seen as an expert in this field, I have news for you. There's millions of experts in this world, but there's one Steve Harper,
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
or one that I consider. We'll go into that in another conversation. Look at it from that perspective. To be uniquely yours and to be seen as you in the context of everything you bring to the table, whether or not it is something that's good that's happening or not, keeps you, how do I say it? It keeps you true to your personal values and integrity.
Yep. Yep. No, well said. I mean, and to your point, I mean, you have to have that confidence in yourself first before you can and know how you want yourself to be perceived, before you expect anybody else to perceive you that way, right? And so I think it's an important exercise for you to go through and legitimately think about it. And I mean, just this morning, I've had 2 or 3 instances where I could have responded differently had I been thinking about this proactively. But of course, I didn't have this great question, but now I do. And maybe front and center in part of my daily practice, I tend to, use my journal a fair amount every morning. I meditate every morning, but maybe that question needs to be at the top of every journal page. How do I want to be seen today? How do I want to set my plan in motion so that I can maximize the best communication I can have with everybody I interact with, and ultimately be able to, exude the confidence and the performance that I want to do to make sure that I'm maximizing the value of every single day. And if I don't think about it, then I probably do tend to be more reactionary and off the cuff. And if you prepare yourself mentally, then you are legitimately setting yourself up for success.
I will invite you, if you're going to do it in a journal, to eliminate the word today. Because how you want to be seen is how people will carry over how you were seen the last time into how they see you right now.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. No, that's really good. I think this is a really amazing question. I hope our audience really pays attention to this and actually takes it to heart and ask yourself that question on an ongoing, consistent basis, because I think it can really bring some extreme value. Would be fun to come back to this in a future episode and say how has my perspective shifted, now that I'm going to be utilizing this on an ongoing, consistent basis. I know my wife will be appreciative of it. So, I know there's a positive ripple already happening there. So thanks for that, Donna.
You're welcome. And I will also invite people, think about it. Anybody going for an interview, anybody going to backer for financing for a project, if I'm speaking to Americans, ask yourself, how do you want to be seen? Because I can't tell you how many testers I work with who need to get the funding and backing perspective of their projects in place. And they are so busy with the caveats that this, I know that this is just like a small portion of what you're going to do, or whatever they say to frame or create that caveat at the beginning minimizes their impact. Yeah. You want to be seen as this innovator, creator, game changer, impactful person. Then you need to get that question asked and answered in your mind before you open your mouth.
Yeah. Yep.
So think about it for all areas. Do you want to be seen as a loving parent who still sets boundaries for their kids? So all of the things that you're going to put in place, then tie it in with your intention and say, what is my intention in every role of my life? And how do I want to be seen in that role?
Yeah.
So just keep expanding on that question. It will always, always serve you.
Yep, absolutely. Well, another great conversation, another amazing question that we can put to work immediately in our own lives. And thank you for putting it forward today. I think my head is spinning with ways that I personally am going to apply this to my own life and my work. So thank you so much for putting it on the table for us to discuss today. So very quickly, the best way for folks to reach out to us and talk, maybe share some topics or ideas that they would like us to have on a future episode. How can they get in contact with us, Donna?
Well, contact us through our YouTube page. Facebook, we have Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Look for that and continue the conversation because we're posting on there. And our websites, obviously, mine is donnacarlin.com, yours is ripplecentral.com. We both have ways to contact us and connect with us on social media. Let's
Absolutely.
keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And, that's, I'm excited for our next conversation. It'll be coming up very soon. And, as always, Donna, thanks for making my head spin a little bit.
And thank you for doing the same in return.
All right. Well, you take care. Have a great day.
You too.